Welcome to the Rando podcast, everyone. I'm Chris Crimson.
And I'm Nyx. If you're new around here, we'd love it if you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our future deep dives.
Absolutely. We really appreciate you joining our conversation. And a big thank you to our sponsors over on YouTube, Chris, the Plant-Based, and Emma Advanced.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Your support makes these explorations possible.
It really does.
You know, it's funny. When you think about it, you've got these foods that have been around forever, like way back when.
Absolutely.
And tofu is a great example. It's just this plain block, right?
Right.
But there's a whole lot more to it than you might think.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the story of tofu is actually full of surprises.
It is.
And we've got a ton of really cool information here today to dive into.
A lot to unpack.
Yeah, we're going deep on the history, the real deal story, and talking about all the amazing things you can do with tofu, how flexible it is in the kitchen.
Its versatility is amazing.
Yeah.
And for people newer to plant-based eating or who just see it as this trendy health food, they might not know that his history goes way, way back.
It really does. So that's our mission today, right? To take you all the way back to the beginning, to ancient times, and then bring it forward to where it is now as this global food. We want to pack in all the most interesting and useful stuff so you can really appreciate this. I mean, it seems like a really simple ingredient.
It does.
But it's
not that simple.
It's not that simple.
No.
So we've gone through all this material and pulled out what we think are the most interesting points, the stuff that's going to stick with you.
Right.
And maybe even change how you look at that block of tofu the next time you see it at the grocery store.
Exactly.
All right, so let's get started with the basics. Where in the world did tofu come from?
Well, the most common theory, the most accepted one, is that tofu started in ancient China.
Okay.
During the Han Dynasty, which was a pretty long time ago, about 200 BC to 220 AD.
Wow.
And there's this really popular story that gets passed around that says Prince Luan, who lived from 179 to 122 BC, invented it.
Okay.
He was the grandson of the first Han emperor. And this story really took hold in Chinese writings around the 16th century.
Okay.
Some of them even directly state that tofu was first created by Prince Luan.
So Prince Luan, a bit of a food pioneer, according to this story.
Right.
But okay, you said story.
Right.
Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
Because hard evidence from that long ago is rare. What we do know is that in Chinese history, it was really common to link big inventions to influential people, like emperors or princes, things like that.
Makes sense.
It kind of gave the discovery more prestige, more weight.
Right.
So while the Prince Luan story is super popular, what's important to understand is that figuring out exactly where a food that old comes from is often more about cultural stories than finding an absolute historical record.
Interesting. So even if we don't know for sure if it was the prince, the timing at least, it has to make sense, right?
The Han Dynasty time frame actually does line up with something that's super important.
Yeah.
When soybeans became a major crop in China.
Okay.
So the idea that tofu could have appeared during this period, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Even if we don't know exactly who the first person was to make it.
Right. Okay, so ancient China, Han Dynasty, that seems like the most likely starting point.
Yep.
And we've got a great story to go with it, but you said there are other possibilities too, right?
There are. There are a couple of really interesting alternative ideas about how tofu might have come about. One theory is that it was basically an accident.
Oh, wow.
Imagine someone boiling and grinding soybeans, making a paste, and then adding in some sea salt that wasn't totally refined.
Okay.
This kind of salt would have calcium and magnesium salts in it. And those are exactly the minerals that make soy milk curdle.
Oh, wow.
And that's how you get tofu. It's like those salts act like tiny magnets, pulling the proteins in the soy milk together to frame the tofu.
So a total accident, a lucky mistake. That's kind of how a lot of things are discovered, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Someone's just messing around in the kitchen, try something new, and boom.
New food is born.
Exactly. Now, another theory is that the ancient Chinese might have learned how to make tofu from Mongolian tribes.
Okay.
These tribes were really good at curdling milk.
Okay.
And so the idea is that maybe the Chinese saw this and thought, hey, we could try that with soy milk. And there's actually some linguistic evidence that kind of backs this up. The Chinese word argeting, which was used during the Sui dynasty, a bit later than the Han dynasty, it meant milk curdled, like yogurt. And it sounds a lot like the later term tofu, which means beans curdled, which is tofu.
So they saw the Mongolians making something like cheese, maybe, and got inspired?
Right, maybe they thought, hey, if they can do it with milk, we can do it with soybeans.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that these are still just theories. Hard proof is tough to come by.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is going way back.
Right.
But it is interesting to think about how even the simplest foods have these kind of mysterious origins.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier that some historians actually debate about when tofu became a widely eaten food.
Yeah. There are some modern historians who actually question whether the Han Dynasty origin story is completely accurate. They point to the Song Dynasty, which was much later, like 960 to 1279 is the time when tofu was everywhere and well documented.
Right.
This suggests that maybe there was a really early basic version of tofu back in the Han Dynasty,
Okay.
but it might not have been the firm, tasty tofu we know today.
Got it. So maybe Han Dynasty tofu was like version 1.0.
Right.
And then the Song Dynasty, it's like tofu 2.0. It evolved.
Exactly. It's a great way to think about it. Food history rarely follows a straight line. It's all about changes and variations over time. And these different theories show how hard it can be to pinpoint the exact beginning of something, especially before written records were common.
Makes sense.
We're piecing together a puzzle with little bits of information, folklore, language clues,
Right.
and that naturally leads to different interpretations.
Okay. So ancient roots, a prince, some happy accidents, a possible link to Mongolian tribes, and a timeline that might have spanned centuries.
Right.
That's a lot. But can we paint a picture of what that very first tofu making process might have looked like?
Based on what we can gather, the earliest methods were probably pretty basic. They likely started by soaking soybeans in water, just to soften them up. Then they'd grind these softened beans into a paste.
Okay.
Add more water, and you've got soy milk.
Got it.
Heat that up, often to a boil, and then comes the key step,
What's that?
adding something to make the soy milk curdle. Early on, that was likely nagari, which has a lot of magnesium chloride and is found in unrefined sea salt.
Okay.
It's possible they also use natural fermentation sometimes.
So it's like making cheese, but with soybeans.
Exactly. Once the soy milk curdled and formed those solid chunks, they'd press it to get rid of extra liquid, the whey.
Right.
That gave the tofu a firmer texture and helped it last longer.
Makes sense.
Those basic steps really do support the idea that maybe tofu was discovered by accident.
Yeah.
It's not a super complicated process at its core.
Fascinating. All right, so we've got these simple beginnings, probably in ancient China, but how did tofu spread to other parts of the world?
Right.
What was that journey like?
Well, as we talked about, tofu got more popular in China during the Song Dynasty.
Yeah.
But even before that, during the Tang Dynasty, which was 618 to 907 CE, tofu was already seen as something special. Royalty and the wealthy ate it.
Oh, wow.
And beyond food, they used it in medicine too.
Interesting.
They thought it helped with digestion and made people stronger. This progression, starting maybe as an accident and then becoming something valued by different social classes and even used for health, it really shows how people came to appreciate its worth.
Yeah, it's interesting how a food can go from being this new thing
Right.
to becoming so deeply rooted in a culture.
Absolutely. And then from China, tofu's journey went east to Japan.
Okay.
This was around the Nara period, which was 710 to 794 AD. And it's thought that Buddhist monks who traveled between China and Japan brought it over.
Okay.
Tofu became a major part of the vegetarian diet, especially in Shojin Ryori, which is the super strict vegetarian cuisine of Zen Buddhist monks.
So a food that might have been a mistake at first
Yeah.
became this central part of a mindful way of eating.
Right. And initially, in Japan, like early China, tofu was mostly eaten by monks and samurai. It was a valued food.
Okay.
But then gradually it spread to everyone else during the Edo period, 1603 to 1868 AD. And by the late 18th century, tofu was everywhere.
Wow.
There was even a best-selling book called Tofu Hyakuchin, which means 100 tofu delicacies.
100 tofu delicacies? That's amazing.
Yeah, it shows just how much they were using it and all the creative ways they were preparing it.
That's a real sign of how important it had become in Japanese food culture.
Totally. And the journey didn't stop there. Tofu also made its way to the Korean peninsula during the Goryeo dynasty. That was 918 to 1392.
Okay.
And in Korea, it's called dubu. It became a staple pretty quickly, appearing in both royal meals and everyday dishes.
Wow.
And get this, in Korean culture, dubu even became symbolic.
Interesting.
They associate it with purity, innocence, new beginnings.
Oh, wow.
It's sometimes given to people after big life events.
Symbolic food. That's fascinating. Can you give me some examples of how it's used in Korean cooking?
Sure, there's dubu jjigae, a hearty, often spicy stew with tofu,
Okay.
and baked dubu, which is steamed tofu with a dipping sauce, a simple dish that lets the pure tofu flavor shine through.
Okay. So it's both versatile and appreciated in its simplest form.
Exactly.
Now, from Japan and Korea, where did tofu travel to next?
Well, from China, it also spread south to Southeast Asia, probably to Vietnam and Thailand around the 10th or 11th centuries.
Okay.
This was around the same time Buddhism was becoming more popular in those regions.
Uh-huh.
And just like in other places, tofu adapted to local culinary traditions.
Okay.
That led to regional variations, different ways of making it, different textures, flavors, and how it was used in dishes.
So it was like tofu was on this culinary adventure,
It was?
adapting to all these different environments and tastes.
Exactly, but its journey to the Western world, that was much later.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Europeans first encountered tofu in the 17th century. A Spanish explorer named Domingo Fernández de Navarrete, he actually wrote about how it was made in China in a book he published in English in 1704.
That's interesting. So it was known about,
Yeah,
but it didn't become a Western staple right away.
not at all. It was the health food movement of the 1960s and 1970s when tofu really started to gain some traction in the West.
Okay.
More people were interested in vegetarianism and plant-based diets back then.
Yeah.
Tofu was seen as a good, affordable meat substitute.
Right. And it's interesting how these different cultural shifts can affect how popular a food is.
Totally.
It goes from a royal delicacy to a Buddhist staple to a health food trend.
Exactly. And now tofu's everywhere.
It really is. It's global. You find it in cuisines all over the world.
Everywhere.
So, after this long journey, what makes tofu so appealing from a nutrition standpoint?
Well, tofu is what we call nutrient dense.
Okay.
It's got a great mix of those macronutrients, the carbs, fats, proteins, and micronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. Its protein content is what really stands out.
Okay.
It's a complete protein. That means it has all 9 essential amino acids that we need to get from food because our bodies can't make them on their own.
Oh, wow.
That's a huge deal for people eating plant-based. It's not just protein, it's a really good source of it.
Yeah, that's a great point. So it really is a good alternative to meat for those essential building blocks.
Right. And it has fat too, but a good amount of it is the heart-healthy unsaturated kind, both monounsaturated and polyunsaturated.
Oh, okay.
Plus, it's naturally low in carbs and has some fiber too.
Got it.
Now, those amounts can change a bit depending on the type of tofu you're talking about.
Right, I guess silken tofu and extra firm tofu are going to be a little different.
Exactly.
So what about vitamins and minerals? What does it offer there?
Tofu has several key micronutrients. It's especially high in calcium, which is important for strong bones, nerves, muscles.
Okay.
And the calcium content can be even higher if the tofu was made using calcium sulfate as a coagulant.
Interesting.
It also provides iron, which is crucial for carrying oxygen in your blood, and manganese, which is involved in metabolism and is an antioxidant. Plus, you get selenium, phosphorus, magnesium, copper, zinc, and some B vitamins too.
So it's not just protein, it's a whole range of essential things our bodies need.
It is.
Yeah.
And beyond those, tofu also has some really interesting plant-based compounds called isoflavones.
Okay.
These have a mild estrogen-like effect in the body, and research suggests they might be good for us in various ways.
Isoflavones, yeah, I've heard about those. What kind of benefits are we talking about?
Well, studies have linked isoflavones to better heart health. They might help lower blood pressure and cholesterol levels. They're also being studied for their potential role in reducing the risk of certain cancers, like breast, prostate, and endometrial cancer, although more research is needed there.
Okay.
Some studies even suggest they could be good for bone health and help with menopausal symptoms.
That's a pretty long list of potential benefits, but I know there are concerns out there about soy and isoflavones, especially when it comes to cancer risk. What does the research actually say about that?
That's a really important thing to address. There are some misconceptions floating around that isoflavones increase cancer risk, particularly breast cancer.
Right.
But the vast majority of research, especially in humans, just doesn't support that.
Okay.
In fact, lots of studies suggest that eating soy foods might actually have a protective effect.
Interesting.
So it's key to understand that the mild estrogen-like activity of isoflavones is not the same as the estrogen your body produces naturally.
Right.
And most Major health organizations agree that soy foods are safe and can be a part of a healthy diet,
Okay.
even for people who have had breast cancer.
That's good to clarify because I think some of that old information sticks around.
Yeah.
Anything else we should know on the nutritional side of tofu?
Well, tofu does have those things called anti-nutrients. They can make it a little harder for your body to absorb all the good stuff.
Okay.
But if you're eating a balanced diet, they're really not a big deal.
Uh-huh.
And traditional ways of preparing soybeans, like soaking, sprouting, and fermenting, those can actually reduce anti-nutrients even more.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, they're there, but the benefits of tofu definitely outweigh any concerns about anti-nutrients.
So all in all, it sounds like tofu is this nutritional powerhouse,
It is.
packed with protein, good fats, vitamins, minerals, and those potentially beneficial compounds we talked about.
Right.
But let's dive a little deeper into the health benefits. How can eating tofu actually improve our well-being?
Well, like we touched on earlier, the potential benefits for heart health are pretty big.
Okay.
Studies have suggested that adding tofu and other soy foods to your diet might lower your risk of heart disease.
Interesting.
This could be because it might lower LDL cholesterol levels, the bad kind.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it has those heart-healthy unsaturated fats. And there's even some evidence that soy protein might lower blood pressure a bit.
So swapping some meat for tofu could be a good move for your heart?
It seems that way.
Makes sense. Okay, what about other health aspects?
Tofu could play a role in cancer prevention, too. Like we said with isoflavones, some research has linked eating soy to a lower risk of certain cancers, like breast, prostate, endometrial, and lung cancer. And again, the science suggests that soy foods don't increase your risk of breast cancer.
Okay.
In fact, they might even offer some protection.
That's really good to know.
And tofu can contribute to bone health. It has calcium and magnesium, both essential for strong bones and preventing osteoporosis.
Right.
Plus, the protein in tofu also plays a part in bone health.
Okay.
And for those of you watching your weight, tofu can be a great food to include.
Yeah.
It's high in protein, which helps you feel full and eat less overall.
Uh-huh.
And it's not high in calories itself.
So it's a satisfying but lean protein source.
Exactly. There's also early research looking at whether isoflavones can benefit brain function and help ease menopausal symptoms, like hot flashes.
Interesting.
But the results are still mixed.
Makes sense.
But overall, the evidence points to a whole bunch of great health benefits from eating tofu.
Absolutely. Now, for a lot of people, especially those exploring plant-based eating, tofu is a real kitchen hero.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about how versatile it is.
Let's do it.
Where does tofu show up in vegan meals?
Pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
Starting with breakfast, tofu is a fantastic egg replacement.
Oh, okay.
A classic tofu scramble made with firm or extra firm tofu, some veggies, spices like turmeric and black salt. That's a really satisfying vegan breakfast option.
Okay.
You can also find it in breakfast burritos with vegan sausage.
Huh.
Lots of options.
So tofu for breakfast, who knew?
Right.
What about lunch?
Lunch is another time for tofu to shine. Crispy tofu lettuce wraps made with baked or pan-fried tofu and a sweet chili sauce are a great light option.
Okay.
Grilled tofu, marinated and served with pineapple, that's a nice summer meal.
That sounds good.
Cold vegan noodle salads often have sautéed or marinated tofu in them. Even a basic sandwich can get a protein boost with some crispy dill pickle tofu.
Okay.
And of course, baked tofu is awesome in salads and grain bowls.
So from light to hearty, there's something for everyone at lunchtime.
Yeah.
And then dinner, which seems like the place where tofu really shines.
Oh, yeah. Tofu stir-fries are super popular.
Yeah.
Firm or extra firm tofu, all kinds of veggies, sauces like peanut, teriyaki, sweet and sour.
Okay.
Tofu curries are delicious and flavorful.
Yeah.
Baked tofu with different marinades and seasonings can be a whole meal. And you can even use crumbled tofu in vegan versions of comfort food classics, like lasagna.
So creative. What about unexpected ways to use tofu?
There are tons. You've got baked tofu bites seasoned with all sorts of spices, buffalo tofu that's breaded and baked or air-fried, crispy tofu fries with nutritional yeast. There are even tofu crackers and chips.
Wow, I never would have thought of that.
Right. And then desserts, don't forget those.
Oh, yeah.
Silken tofu is a great way to add a creamy texture to vegan chocolate mousse, puddings, cheesecakes, even pumpkin pie,
Oh, wow.
and noodle dishes.
Yeah.
Tofu's everywhere there too. Stir-fried noodles with crispy tofu, spicy chili tofu noodles, Asian-inspired noodle bowls with marinated or fried tofu. There's so much you can do.
It really shows how creative plant-based cuisine can be.
It does.
All this really highlights that tofu's neutral flavor is what makes it so adaptable, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That and its ability to really soak up different flavors is why it works so well in all these cuisines and meals.
Okay. So we know what it can do, but how do you actually make it taste good
Right.
and get that awesome texture? Let's talk about preparing and cooking tofu for the best results.
Well, for firm and extra firm tofu, the first thing you want to do is press it. This gets rid of excess water, makes it firmer, and helps it soak up marinades better and crisp up when you cook it.
Got it.
You can use a tofu press, which works really well, or just wrap it in towels and put something heavy on top.
Right.
Pressing is key to getting rid of that watery, spongy texture some people don't like about tofu.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Then, to add flavor, you've got to marinate it.
Yeah.
Because tofu doesn't have a strong taste on its own, a good marinade can make a huge difference.
Right.
There are endless vegan tofu marinade options. Soy sauce based with things like rice vinegar, sesame oil, garlic, ginger. That's great for Asian-inspired dishes. Sweet and spicy with maple syrup, sriracha, or gochujang is another option. And then there are herbed marinades with thyme, rosemary, oregano, good for savory dishes.
Okay.
Some people even suggest tearing the tofu instead of cubing it before marinating because it creates more surface area.
Oh, that's interesting.
More surface area means more flavor.
More flavor. So how you cook it, that's got to make a difference too, right?
Huge difference.
Yeah.
Frying, either in a pan or deep frying, that's the classic way to get it super crispy,
Yeah.
especially if you coat it in cornstarch first.
Right.
Baking is another great option. Gives you a nice firm texture if you press and marinate it beforehand. Grilling gives you that smoky, charred flavor.
Yeah.
Again, pressing and marinating are good here. Stir frying is quick and easy. Firm or extra firm tofu holds up well. And then you can braise tofu, boil it, that makes it chewier, or even air fry it for a crispy result with less oil.
So it's really about knowing the techniques, right?
It is.
Pressing, marinating, and the right cooking method. That's how you unlock tofu's potential and avoid some of those common complaints about it.
Totally. It's about understanding its nature and how to work with it to get the flavors and textures you want.
All right. History, nutrition, versatility, cooking. Now let's break down the different types of tofu you can find.
Okay.
It's not just one big uniform block, right?
Not at all. There's a whole world of tofu out there.
Okay, tell me about it.
Let's start with silken tofu, sometimes called soft tofu. This type is undrained, unpressed.
Okay,
It's super soft, almost custard-like with a lot of water in it.
gotcha.
It's perfect for smoothies, creamy sauces, dressings, dips, and vegan desserts like mousse or cheesecake.
Okay.
It also works well in soups like miso and can even be used as an egg replacement when baking.
So silken is that smooth, creamy option. What's next?
Soft tofu, which is similar to silken, but maybe a little less smooth.
Okay.
It's delicate, has a high water content, and you can use it pretty much interchangeably with silken tofu in a lot of recipes.
Got it.
Then there's medium tofu, which is somewhere between soft and firm. It's denser, but still needs to be handled carefully.
Okay.
It's good for gently simmered dishes and can also be eaten cold with toppings, like kyako, a Japanese dish.
Okay. So we're moving toward the firmer textures. What about the kind most people think of when they hear tofu?
That would be firm tofu.
Yeah.
It's got less water, holds its shape well, and is super versatile. Great for stir frying, pan frying, baking, grilling, even crumbling.
Right.
Then you've got extra firm tofu,
Right.
even less water and very dense. Great for slicing, cubing, and getting crispy.
Okay.
And finally, super firm tofu, the driest and densest of them all. It's almost meaty, and you often don't even have to press it. Perfect for grilling, pan frying.
So you've got a real spectrum of textures to work with, each one suited to different things.
Exactly.
What about other interesting types of tofu?
There are some processed varieties out there. You've got smoked tofu, which has that smoky flavor.
Okay.
Flavored tofu, which is pre-seasoned.
Right.
Fermented tofu, like stinky tofu, which is super pungent, definitely an acquired taste.
Okay.
And then tofu skin, also called yuba or fusuk.
Uh-huh.
It's made from the skin that forms on heated soy milk. It's chewy and can be used in soups, curries, or even fried like bacon.
It's like a whole family of tofu products.
It is.
And it really highlights that you need to choose the right tofu for the job.
Totally. You wouldn't
No.
grill silken tofu, for example.
Yeah, definitely not.
Understanding the differences helps you get the results you want in your cooking.
Okay. So we've talked about the journey, the nutrition, the cooking, the types. Now, with more and more people thinking about how their food choices impact the planet, let's talk about tofu and the environment.
Okay.
How sustainable is it really?
Generally, tofu has a much smaller environmental impact than producing meat, especially beef, and even chicken.
Okay.
Animal agriculture produces a lot of greenhouse gases, uses a ton of land for grazing and feed crops, and takes a lot of water.
Yeah.
Tofu is a much more efficient way to get protein from plants.
So when we talk about the environmental concerns around soybeans, it's important to remember that most of those soybeans are actually going to feed animals that we eat.
Exactly. Choosing tofu means cutting out that middleman and using resources more directly.
Right. It's a more direct path to protein.
It is. But there are still some valid concerns about soybean farming itself.
Okay.
Things like deforestation, especially in places like the Amazon,
Yeah.
and issues like monoculture farming, the use of pesticides and fertilizers, and water consumption.
Those are all important things to consider when you're making food choices. So is tofu production totally guilt-free?
Not entirely.
Okay.
But here's a really important fact. Something like 77 to 80% of the soybeans grown worldwide are used to feed livestock. Not for making tofu or other foods for humans to eat directly.
That puts things in perspective.
Yeah, so a big part of the environmental impact of soybeans is actually because of the demand for meat.
So reducing your meat consumption is probably more effective than cutting out soy products completely?
Yeah, that seems to be the takeaway.
Okay.
And to further minimize your impact, look for sustainably sourced, organic, non-GMO tofu.
Makes sense.
The industry is also getting better about using sustainable practices, like conserving water, being more energy efficient, using renewable energy, sourcing soybeans more sustainably, and using eco-friendly packaging.
So it seems like things are moving in the right direction.
They are. And when you compare the environmental cost of tofu protein versus most animal proteins, tofu generally comes out on top.
Okay. Well, that was a deep dive for sure.
Yeah.
We went deep on the history of tofu.
We did.
We explored all its amazing health benefits and how versatile it is.
We'd love to hear your thoughts maybe in the comments if you're watching on YouTube.
Thanks again to everyone for tuning in to the Rando podcast. If you enjoyed this discussion and want to explore more fascinating topics with us, please subscribe. We drop new discussions regularly.
And a final thank you to our wonderful sponsors on YouTube, Chris, The Plant-Based, and Emma Advanced. We truly appreciate your support.
Thanks again for listening. We wish you all the very best.
Goodbye for now.